What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Marketing Nomad Show. It's your favorite marketer and podcast host. My name is Prit. Today with me, I have a very special guest, Brandon Neely. A little bit about him before we start talking to him today. Brandon Neely is a serial entrepreneur, profit first, and bank on yourself professional, and the co-host of Wealth Wisdom Financial podcast with his wife and business partner, Amanda. He and Amanda founded and managed Overflow Coffee Bar, L3C, from 2008 through 2018. They learned a lot of what to do and not to do through that experience. They have since sold that business. Now, as financial allies, they share their experiential knowledge through podcasting and developing personalized financial strategies for individuals and profitability strategies for businesses. They continue to help clients implement the profit first system, which is something that we're going to get into in this podcast episode, as well as the how to use infinite banking / banking on yourself framework, which is also another thing that we're going to get into in this podcast episode to grow their businesses and future. Brandon, how are we doing today?
Oh, I'm doing good. It was a mouthful, right? I feel like that was only I didn't put in my military background or music background either on there. So I could have added that, but I'm not going to do that.
Oh, that's amazing. How did you go from a military background and music to the entrepreneur that you are today?
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this today. I wanted to make a difference in the world. They pretty much told me before when I was a kid that I wouldn't be able to do health-wise. I wouldn't be able to join the service, right? So of course, I'm like, well, you can't tell me what I can and cannot do. So I joined the Marine Corps. I wish I would have joined a different service, like the Air Force or something. But I joined that because I wanted to, I didn't know what I was doing actually when I was a young kid. So did that, got out because, the military wasn't for me. After several years, I learned that. And I went into the music industry because I still wanted to change the world, still wanted to make a difference because I believe both of those careers were making a difference. And so I was in the music industry, saw and met some of the biggest celebrities and saw and experienced some of the biggest scandals that I will not talk about on here, but I know that there's some things that I've seen that have been in the news that are true. And so that was interesting. Got out of that because I still wanted to change the world, still wanted to make a difference. And a couple years later, my wife and I met and ended up saying, well, let's start a coffee shop, right? And the reason we started a coffee shop is because coffee is the second most widely traded commodity in the world. Americans, the number one consumer, yet the poorest countries are often coffee growing countries. So how do we make a difference? How do we help people? And so by what you buy actually makes impact. So we started that. It's all about ethical economics and community building. But the problem is we were not taking care of ourselves in the process. There was a lot of issues and things that happened where, I almost had a heart attack, in that because of just the stress and the no money going in. Because, when you're an entrepreneur and business owner, people will tell you, oh, but you love it. That's why you do it. And you're like, yes, but I still like to eat. And I don't like to eat ramen every day.
Yes.
That's actually not healthy to eat ramen, at least American ramen, not in the packs, with all the sodium. I'm a big fan of ramen, but it's a different style. So anyway, learned that some of the stuff not to do. We were also expecting a child, had a flood in the business as well that I was able to overcome. And we're like, man, I cannot have a child in this environment. It's just not going to work. It's actually illegal to have the baby behind the bar. So we sold the business because, life is changing. We were caretakers of my mother-in-law at the time and going to have a newborn. And we just couldn't take the sacrifices that we were for the 10 years So we sold it. But we created an amazing business that could be sold.
That is amazing. And I think that I truly believe that entrepreneurs, all of us combined, there are certain behavioral patterns that overlap. And that is why we are the way we are. And the fact that you said, when someone told you can't join the military, and you said, well, why not? I'm going to do it. I think that's such an entrepreneur thing to say,
Yeah. Oh,
that
yeah.
why not? That's such an instinct for us. And I absolutely love that. And I think it shows even through your entrepreneurial journey. So how did you go from selling your coffee business to where you are today? Today, you are a financial coach. How did that happen?
Yeah. And I will say, in the music industry, how I did not have any background in the music industry, but I was like, how do you get into that industry? And so I looked in the white pages and called somebody, and they said, well, intern. I was like, all right, well, I'll do that. So I did. And so I got into this one is because the financial tools that we created and used was what helped us overcome the obstacles, because we had a flood in our business, literally like the roof was off, and then it rained and flooded the business, and we had these tools that we were able to overcome that transition thing that happened. They call it like a black swan event, right?
Yes.
Something that happens outside of what you were expecting.
Yes.
And we all have those, whether it's a coronavirus crisis, economic crisis, or a mother-in-law having a stroke, right? Those things happen. But we wanted to set up our foundation, and we did, to be able to overcome the obstacles regardless of what happens. And I think that in our world right now, most people have built their financial pyramids upside down, right? They're risking more than they can afford, right? And they're told to, right?
Yes.
And it's been in that position for a long time, and they have not built stability. And that's again why we were using, we call this thing infinite banking policies. That was our investment in ourself savings vehicle that we could leverage and use, but it was building a foundation, right? And so I tell people, hey, build a foundation. And that's kind of why I got into this, is because I see too many horror stories, too many people going into business or entrepreneurship, and the success rate isn't that high. No. Right? It is. There's a lot of, I would call, blood on the streets when it comes to this, and we don't even see it. And I'm like, yeah, and it's hard. I mean, you run a business. It's not easy, right?
It's not easy at all. And in fact, this is actually something that I touch upon in my upcoming book. And that is, especially during the initial stages of the entrepreneurial journey, it's hard because the return on investment that you do put in is not really shown immediately to you. The return on investment is much, much later. So it's like you're putting all of this energy, you're putting all of this hard work, but you can't really see the return on investment. It's really hard to keep going during the initial stages. And of course, even the monetary investment, the money that you put in, it doesn't really come back to you until a certain threshold point. And people give up before they reach that threshold point. That's a very common phenomenon that happens. And I mean, don't quote me on this stat, but I did read somewhere, I'm not sure where it was, but they said that 95% of entrepreneurial journeys, they actually fail, and only 5% make it. And that's such a big stat. That's horrible. I think that we need more of people succeeding in their entrepreneurial journey if we want to advance as a world. And
and it takes time, right? So my business is 4 years old, right? And my child is 4 years old. And so when you have a baby, right, you have to do a lot of stuff that you don't want to do, like wipe their butts, make them eat. No sleepless nights. I don't know if you have a kid or anything, but at some level it's very similar. And then they grow up, and if you've dealt into that, and there's a lot of love involved in that, right? And so I call my first business the first child, right? that we had to learn and do, and then it matures until you have a staff or a team, right? And a lot of times people think that they're going to get to a 10-year-old business without going through the efforts of a 1-year-old business, right? It's a very different thing, and you do not have the staff or the budget or anything to overcome that sometimes.
Absolutely. There's a lot of restrictions, limitations, resources that you have access to, resources that you do not have access to, especially during the beginning stages where yes, if you have financial backing, it's a whole different story, but we're talking about people who do not have financial backing or who have limited financial resources to begin with. And I guess that brings me to one of my questions, and that is, especially when we're starting the entrepreneurial journey, it's very important to focus on the finance aspect of it. But I do want, from an expert, I do want to understand, why should we focus so much on our financial journey as well as the entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I think that it's very key to everything. Like, you could say I'm good at marketing, but if you don't know your numbers, that's really important. I've had business owners say, I don't know my numbers. I don't like numbers. I'm like, well, you better get used to it.
Yes.
When it comes to metrics and marketing, right? You should know the numbers, right? When it comes to your finances, you should know your numbers. And this is what's interesting right now. We will want a return on investment when we invest in Uber or something like that. But yet we don't want that, or we feel slimy if we take a profit distribution, right? And I think that, and this was part of our problem, is we were last to get paid, right? And I'm not saying that you pay yourself a lot. In some investors, they go in and they use seed funding and all this other stuff that I think is not necessarily a profitable business. It's just running a business on life support, real dialysis kind of. And there's a lot of that, right? And some people who are super rich and saying, I'm going to get a rich relative to help me. I didn't have a rich relative to help me. We did all kinds of things. And then the interesting thing in the US anyway, it's really funny that you can get money to go to college, right? And a lot of loans to go to college. But as a business owner, you can't. It's really hard to get that. And I'm like, really, this is weird. This does not make sense. But that's the way it works. They're looking at risks. And so you have to figure out, how do you begin with the end in mind, right? How do I build that? And having a system in place where you're making sure you're not feeding the beast of the business that's never going to help pay you or help you.
Absolutely. That's definitely one thing that I've learned in the last 3 years as well. I mean, despite having an MBA with a degree in marketing, I think that I too struggled understanding the financial aspect of a business, because what you study in your academic is, there's a natural gap between what you study and what is actually happening in the business world. There are different factors that you need to take into picture and all of those things. And for me, it was tough to understand. So where can people start to understand their finances? What are some of the tips that you can give my audience?
Yeah, I think, and again, it's academia versus the real world is very different. I mean, I've had people who are like MBAs coming and giving me tips, and I'm like, dude, I don't have that money to do what you're saying, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that you have to start with where you're at, right? And really look and say, okay, and there's 3 things that I tell every business owner, that you want to know that you know that you're called to this, because it's going to be hard, right? You will have, when you start a business, you think your grandma and your mother and everybody else, all your friends are going to love it. Most of the time, they don't even care. And so you need to know that know how to sell or build into that. Have a team right? That's not related to you, that care about you versus just the business, right? What you produce. And then my third thing is know your numbers. Those three things are going to help you, and because there will be times that is super hard. So have a team, know your numbers, and know that you're called, because don't just do it because it sounds cool. Go get a job then or something. I don't know. Right. And so did I answer your question? I kind of
Yes,
missed it, I think.
absolutely. No, I mean, my question was, where do people start when it comes to,
Yep.
and you absolutely nailed it. You need to have a purpose. That is absolutely essential, because there are going to be more days than one where you're going to be asking yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? And you really
Mhm.
need to have an answer at that point, because this is hard. And as
Yeah.
much as there's so much hype and, fascination with the entrepreneurial world, there is a sense of passion and mission that drives each one of us to get to
Yep.
the end point of whatever our mission is. And our mission, and I'm sure yours is almost the same as well, it's a higher purpose. Other than, yes, we have our own
Yeah.
personal financial goals to achieve, but there is a mission beyond us. So that's what the entrepreneurial journey is about. And I really loved that you touched upon that, because that is very important, especially for
And
people.
supporting other small businesses, and like, because I feel like in our world we say it with our words, but our dollars don't match our words, and
That's
we say,
true.
well, I support this until I need to go buy something on Amazon, and then I'm gonna go, and
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, they can afford a lot more to buy thousands of things in bulk, and the entrepreneur
Yeah,
business owner can't, right?
that's
And
true.
so how do you support it and support other business owners? If you're
Yes.
one, realize that, how are we empathetic on the other side of things?
I think that's beautiful advice. That's absolutely beautiful advice. And I definitely am very intentional. Like, ever since I became a business owner, I've been very intentional about choosing small businesses, highlighting them in my reels. Whenever I talk about any products, making sure that they get the exposure. I don't earn anything out of it, but it's just my way of giving back to the community. And I think that's a really important thing. And I guess I think it's time for us to get into a little bit about the systems that you have created for your clients. And I would love to get to know it. And I know that it will
Yeah.
help my listeners as well. So let's first talk about the Profit First system. What is it about, and
Yeah.
how can we implement it for our business?
Yeah. So I go back to a story whenever I was having the coffee shop, and I met with a lawyer, and he's like, we said how awesome we are. We've paid off our debt. We've done this. And he said, how much are you paying yourself? I was like, well, that doesn't matter. Let's not deal with that. And no, seriously, because if you're going to sell a business, you need to make sure you're paying yourself fairly.
Yeah.
And we were not, right.
Mm,
And so we didn't realize that we were starting to implement this profit first system, meaning as you run a business, and the profit first framework is a really awesome framework, and I recommend everybody get the book by Mike Michalowicz on profit first. And what he says is profit comes first, right? If you run a business, and if you invest in the stock market or in other things, we want a return on investment, right? But yet we don't want one in our own business and our own efforts, right? So we should have that, and making sure you pay yourself first, right? So and there's two camps in the entrepreneur world. I think there's the ones that overpay themselves, and then there's the ones that don't pay themselves, right? And so my numbers are going to tell me what my salary is going to be,
mm.
rather than me telling me what my salary is going to be.
Yes.
And if I'm running a good profitable business, what they call it target allocation percentages, 5% is profit, 50% is owner's pay,
Mm.
30% is OPEX, operation expense, 15% goes to taxes. I don't know what your taxes are there, but our taxes are high here. So building in the right system. So I make sure that I'm just a pass-through entity on taxes. So I got to make sure I pay for it. And so thinking through that and my buckets, almost like the envelope system is set, and I will know, hey, I'm running a profitable business instead of OPEX is 80%,
Mm.
right? And it's a cash eating monster that we don't really look at and say, well, how do I make it to 30 or 20 or whatever? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. It does make sense. And I definitely agree with this because when I first started out, I wasn't paying myself. It didn't even occur to me to pay myself, to be very honest with you. As much as I was saving for my business, I was not paying myself. And it was only in my second year that I started saying, no, I got to put my foot down.
Yep.
I've got to start paying myself too. And then keeping a certain percentage of whatever I've made for that year or that month or however it goes.
Yeah.
Because for me as a digital entrepreneur, each month varies very drastically.
Yeah.
So for me, it was more so not the percentage of the year, but percentage of what I earned that month. So it
Yeah.
absolutely makes sense. I think it's very important that we need to learn that our needs matter too, and we need to start putting in that I guess put in that percentage for ourselves. And
Well,
it comes
and
with planning.
you run an Etsy shop, right?
Yes, I
So
do.
probably, I bet you have more sales in November and December than you
Yes.
do in January, right?
No, actually, it flows
Maybe.
into February. If so, for me, my so every business has seasons, and for me, my
Yep.
Etsy shop, it's like November to February because it's marketing, and people
Yep.
like end of the year or beginning of the year, they're kind of panicking about their marketing. That's when it
Yeah.
absolutely sells
Yeah.
for me. So yes, yeah, for me,
Or
that is the period. Yeah.
so that's something I think about a lot there is saying, okay, what's the cycles of the business, right?
Mm.
And for me, even I know I do commission, right? So I might have a big month that covers 3 months, right?
Mm.
But I give myself a salary to
Yes.
keep me on point rather than saying, oh man, I made this amount of money, I'm going to go buy a car now.
Mm.
No, that's not the way it works because
No.
I got 3 months. So thinking about that and again the profit first system, and then we built within that system the still method. That's our kind of, I don't know if you call it proprietary system, but I was like, man, this is a actually pretty simple system, and I don't know why anybody's never thought of it.
Oh, let's
But
hear it. Let's hear it. Tell
yeah.
us a little bit about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the still method. And
Okay.
the reason is because everybody's moving so fast. We want to get, I mean, we're in the world of microwaves, right?
Mm,
Uh, we get mad if we have to wait 20
yeah,
minutes for
absolutely.
anything. But yeah, again, a season of a business, you know, the first couple of years, it's a little dicey, right?
Mm,
And a lot messy, right? So the still method is a method we thought about of doing almost like a spiritual practice, but with your money or with other areas of your life. It's amazing how many people haven't actually thought of a strategy or a roadmap of where they want to go. They're just kind of moving through life really fast, right?
mm,
And so you have to have a goal or plan
yes.
or exit strategy, almost like reverse engineering, where you want your business to go
Yes.
and then build from there. So it's called the still method because we love acronyms. We love like putting those into words. And so it's set your sights, right? These are from doing financial analysis with a bunch of people over and over again. I'm like, what's your dreams? What's your goals? You know how many people don't have dreams and goals? Like they don't even know. They're just kind of living through life without it. I'm like, wait, you should have, like, I can't tell you what you want to do. And then there's marketing, right? So if you don't have a set your sights, everyone else has a plan for your money,
No.
right? That's what marketing does,
Yeah.
is say, oh, well, you don't have a plan. Well, here's a plan. Go
We'll
buy
take it all.
McDonald's. Yeah. And so you have to have a set your sights. So
Yeah.
then you know, and you can say yes or no to something.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit in the plan, or it does. The next letter is track your in and out, right? What's going in, what's going out, budgeting, whatever you want to call it. But it's not restrictive. It's just kind of setting an intention, right? So track your in and out. inspect your progress. That's the next letter, right? Inspect where you want it to go. Or am I doing the things I said that I wanted to, right? Looking at it, right? And then that goes into the next L, look for 1% adjustments. Make those micro adjustments in your business or in your personal life that are going to get you where you want to go. Not just saying it's going to happen and I'm going to take over Mount Everest tomorrow, right? But you look for 1% adjustments. That's where the power happens. No one, like when you look on TikTok or any of those things on these big guys, they didn't just somehow get there. Overnight successes. There was 1% adjustments probably that they made, right? That's the same in your business. And then the next L is live deliberately, right? And we have to be deliberate in our business, write a business plan and implement it. I know that there's a lot of people, the entrepreneur world is crazy. There's a lot of them, but there's a lot of people who I call entrepreneurs. They are just saying they want to be entrepreneurs, but they haven't actually done anything. And that's the live deliberately. The ones that actually, have a podcast and do it intentionally. That's very different than I want to start a podcast, right? Those kind of things. So live deliberately. And then you go over that, right? It's not a thing that you just say, I've done it once, but every month, set your sights. I'm reaching this, track, inspect, look for 1% adjustments and live deliberately. That's the still method, which is opposite of chaos in the world that we live in right now. And what we look at in Wall Street and taxes and everything. And that's, tell me if you've felt this, confusing, haphazard, anxious, overwhelming, and stressful, right? And if you can go into any meeting, business with that focus and still, you'll probably do better. But we're running around like crazy with this chaos, and maybe that's good or not so good.
So Brandon, when you said, chaos and absolute overwhelm, I completely agreed with that, because the last 2 years, it has been so unprecedented. And I think that, like you said, there is some basis of spirituality that goes into the still method. And I highly resonate with that as well. I think in this world of chaos, it's important that we learn how to be still in real life as well, but also implement your still method. And one question that I do want to ask is, if people want to get to know more about the still method, where can they find you?
Yeah. So you can, of course, go to our YouTube channel or podcast, Wealth Wisdom Financial. That's where we do a lot of videos, and YouTube and all of this, and think about like all of that. So totally subscribe, watch a bunch of videos, because that helps. So for more people to see. And then of course, go to stillmethod.com. We bought the URL, of course. And if you go to stillmethod.com, you'll get a little playbook that is we just recently built this in the still method framing. We're going to write a book about it here shortly. We just haven't gotten there yet, but go to stillmethod.com, download the little playbook that asks a lot of questions, and use that framework, right? It's not meant to just be a static thing, and the questions or answers may change. The questions may be the same, but your answers may change, right? As you know, like I have a 4-year-old, and you don't have kids yet, right? But your answers may change 10 years from now, right? Same question may be different, right? So go to stillmethod.com, check that out.
I really like that you keep stressing throughout this episode that you have to keep revisiting. I think that is something that is so important, because one of the mistakes that I see my clients making is they go through the entire process once and then they just dust their hands off it, and then they're like, oh, we're done. But I really like the fact that you have continuously said, no, you have to keep revisiting. And how do we know the frequency that we need to put in to revisit our goals or this method? What are the signs that signals that we probably need to revisit? What do you think?
Oh, I think at least monthly, right? At
Okay.
least on the finances, right?
Mm,
And I do have a membership site. If you go to wealthwisdom.mn.co, we
mm,
do this as a group every
okay.
month in the community, right? So wealthwisdom.mn.co, it's like $10 a month US. But doing it monthly as a community is really helpful, right? But here's the thing: how often, if you want to have a healthy body, right, do you go to the gym,
Yes.
right? Probably regular, right?
Yes.
And if you eat crappy food, there's going to be implications, right?
Yes.
And so, how much do you want to reach those goals? It's all about consistency and making sure you're on track, whether it's monthly with that, or you might do this kind of framework with for me, and I'm married. We've been married for 16 years. Um, it's set your sight. What kind of marriage do I want to be? Track. Am I going on regular dates? Right. Inspect. Are we just vegging on TV? Same kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I might be doing that regular because it's in my head.
Right.
But being intentional about even setting the time is important.
Oh, I absolutely. It's wonderful advice. And I think that more people need to hear that. So I'm really glad that we spoke on that. One last question before we wrap this entire episode up, and that is about your infinite banking concept. Let's talk a little bit about that. We talked a little bit before this podcast recording, and I wanted my listeners, especially those of them who are in the US, to hear a little bit about this from Brandon.
Yeah, we got into the financial services because it was a reluctant financial advisors. I had no idea about this. I just knew I didn't want to be collateral damage. And I think that in our world right now, there's a
Mm,
lot of collateral damage
yeah.
happening with business owners and all kinds of stuff
Yes.
because people are not realizing their numbers, right? And so we fell into this thing called infinite banking. It's properly designed whole life insurance that is designed in the right way, not just your grandma's whole life, but how do we build life insurance that I can use and leverage for both the ups and
Mm,
downs of what's happening, right?
mm,
And so and specifically in the US, building this policy helped me to use my life insurance to overcome an obstacle of a flood, right? I was able to pull out the money,
yes.
took a loan, lower interest than what the Fed and all this other stuff is doing, right? I was able to access my money on a low interest rate and pay it back on my terms. No one was telling me when to or how. And
Mm,
then I was able to overcome the flood.
right.
Then I was able to use it for buying a house. I did 20% down here in the US with my down payment on a house because then I had no PMI insurance, and it brought my rates down a little bit because of the 20% down. And then I paid that back,
Mm,
just again, thinking through strategic, using the still method. And now I'm using my policy again to buy a commercial real estate building. Same money that I've used over and over again, but I had to make sure that I'm saving first
yes.
and building that foundation, not just going and chasing rate of return. I'm building a
Mm,
solid foundation that is going to impact generations.
mm.
And I have to live beyond, or not live beyond, but think about the generations, my
Legacy.
son,
Yes.
legacy,
Yes.
right? And my hope is I build a firm business that well goes beyond me. And this is what the rich do. And I tell people all the time, don't do what the rich tell you to do what the
Mm,
rich do. Don't
yes.
do what the banks tell you to do what the banks do. They are the most profitable business in the world. Every business is in the banking business. Every person is in the banking
Oh,
business.
that's amazing.
um, and you know this, even if it's a different currency, there's a bank, I bet you, right, that you have, right?
Oh,
And they
well,
probably charge you interest.
Yes,
right?
yes. Well, my bank is in the US because my company is in the US. So all of my transactions, all of my taxes, legal stuff, everything happens in the US. But I do have to pay taxes in the US for my company and in
Yeah.
India for myself because I'm right here. So it's more like my services are being conducted in India,
Yeah.
even though
Well, but even then, we don't even if your business was not in the US, you still probably have banks there,
yes,
and
of
they
course.
give, yeah, and it's everywhere. And
Yes.
I'm like, whether it's regional there or whatever. So
Mm,
for me, I think even if maybe you can't do infinite banking because it's a more US thing, but think like a banker, not
yes.
like they want you to think, because they want you to put money in, not give you any money, right, for that, but they'll charge you a lot of money. So how do
Yes.
you think like a bank and think like a business owner?
Oh, I absolutely love that advice. I think that's the first time I've ever heard it. Don't do what the rich do. Don't do what the rich say, but do what they do. And then don't
Yep.
do what the banks tell you and then do what the banks do. I think that's amazing. That's the
Yeah.
first time I've heard of it. And I absolutely, that's advice that I will be taking from this podcast episode. Brandon, thank you
But
so
yeah,
much.
and I think too, like looking at the big businesses, I mean, it is amazing. I'm sure
Yes,
your stuff is on Google, right?
yes,
um, how much money do they take, right? It's just insane how much money they
yes.
take for you. And I'm like, wait, 30% for real?
Mm,
Like, it isn't crazy, the risk, and
yes,
how do we get more control? They control everything.
absolutely.
So how do we take back control? That's
I
what I
think
want to know.
that yeah, that definitely it's important because I think as business owners, we get so wrapped up in the excitement of starting a business and all of that that we don't realize when we are losing control. And I think it's
Yeah.
important. And I think that your still method really taps into taking the time to figure out whether you are in control of your business or not. And I think that's such valuable advice, such a great method. I highly recommend all of you listeners to check out Brandon's website. I'm going to put the links in the description box below as well. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us. Any last words for my audience?
No, just my biggest words is take ownership of this. Really, don't delegate this. I mean, you might have a CFP or a bookkeeper, but don't just say, "Well, my bookkeeper is going to take care of this."
Mm,
Like, understand this whole thing, and you don't have to be in charge, but understand how to read a P&L statement, profit
yes,
and loss statement. Like,
yes.
that's probably a
That's,
good thing.
I think that's
And
life skills. More than
yeah,
anything, I think that's life skills. That's very
and
necessary.
the
Absolutely.
the school will not teach you that. School
Mm,
doesn't teach you how to budget, any of that. You got
yes,
to learn this on your own, because and so watch YouTube videos. I don't know, do something
absolutely.
to learn.
There
So
are so
that's
many
my
courses out there.
keep
There are
learning.
courses, they're free, they're paid courses. There are YouTube channels, there are podcasts. Brandon has his own podcast. Brandon, do you want to tell us a little bit about your podcast as well?
Yeah. So if you go to Wealth Wisdom Financial, that's our podcast. My wife and I do this together. She is really good at communicating. She also does a lot of writing in our community site. So if you go to wealthwisdom.mn.co, it's new. But we're trying to build and help people find their still center so they can go farther, right? So that's the thing. People are like, well, but it's not doing it fast. I'm like, yeah, but if you slow down, it's almost like the tortoise and the
Yes,
hare,
yes,
right? Slow down, you'll actually go further. Um,
absolutely.
but our world is told, well, keep going, keep going.
Yes,
And I think that's crazy. And I'm reading a book, How to Thrive in a World That's Too
busy.
Much Busy. And I'm not promoting the book. I still haven't finished the book, but the craziness is we're told to be busy. We're told to be on this hamster
Mm,
wheel. So how do we slow down
mm,
to build the life we want? So that's, anyway, go to these things and stop.
mm. I think what Brandon is trying to tell us is that it's important for you to take ownership. There are so many resources out there. Brandon has his own podcast. Do check it out. All of the links that we have spoken about The books as well that were mentioned in this episode will be listed below as well. Thank you, Brandon, for coming on my podcast and sharing all of your wisdom, your methods with us, your frameworks. It has been absolutely valuable. There's so many advice that I'm taking personally for my own business as well. So thank you for that. To the listeners who've been listening all the way up until here, thank you so much for listening. I will catch you guys in my next podcast episode. Bye-bye.